Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As has already been said, my name is Michelle Sprent, and I work in the UK and Irish pig industry as a commercial nutritionist. I also do a little bit of work in South Korea, working with a compound feed company over there as well, randomly. I graduated from the University of Aberdeen 15 years ago with a master's in pig production. Initially, I worked for a feed business called SCA Newtech, which is now part of the Cargill Group. And then 4.5 years ago, I moved to a competitor business, a company called Premier Nutrition. And Premier manufacture and supply vitamin and mineral premixes, actually for all species. And about 1/3 of our 40,000 tonnes goes into the pig sector. In terms of my day-to-day work, I'm responsible for working with home mix customers, so those that are producing their own feed on farm. About 40 to 50% of the UK pig industry is fed using home mix systems. I work extensively with producers that are utilising liquid co-products, so things like liquid whey from the cheese manufacturing industry, wheat syrups from bioethanol production, and liquid yeast from beer manufacture. It was this use of co-products that really gave me, or led me to have a greater interest in alternative ingredients. We'd also been having quite long discussions within our own technical team about what the future holds for ingredients, and this is what led me to embark on a Nuffield Scholarship. Before I go into explaining my topic and my findings, I'd just like to express my thanks to Nuffield, firstly for selecting me, and also to my sponsors, Merial and BPEX, for funding my studies. I've been able to look at so much more than just the pig industry, and I've learned so much about other aspects of agriculture. I'm not from a farming background, so for a suburban girl, it's really been a golden opportunity to develop a much greater understanding of what all of you do and my customers do on a day-to-day basis, so thank you. Moving on to my topic, so the title was Sustainable Pig Nutrition. A little bit like Will, this was a very wide remit, and it gave me lots of opportunity to look at lots of different things. Give you a little bit of a background. Feed costs account for about 70% of the production cost in the pig industry. In recent years, we've seen a much increased price volatility in the ingredient market, and with such a high proportion of costs coming from feed, this has obviously been quite a big issue for profitability in the industry. Feed ingredients are now traded on a global basis, and so are very heavily influenced by global economics and demands. When I first joined the industry back in 1999, high-pro soya, which is one of our main protein sources in pig feeds, was trading at about £144 a tonne. In 2012, we saw it hit a record high of £440 a tonne, so a massive increase in a very short space of time. It's eased slightly, but it's still trading at about 330. In addition, we've seen quite a lot of controversy surrounding the use of, in particular, soya. As I said, it's our principal protein source, and that's not just in pig feeds, but in all livestock feeds. Demand has increased due to an increased demand from the human population for more animal protein in their diets, and about 25% of the 253 million tonnes of soya produced globally is used by the pig industry. So on the back of these issues, there's been some discussions about alternative products. With these thoughts in mind, I wanted my scholarship to give me the opportunity to look at what other ingredients are being used elsewhere in the world, in particular from a protein perspective. About 30% of the feed cost comes from the protein fraction, and this is really the fraction that we mostly import. Secondly, are there any ingredients that we may have an opportunity to make more use of in the UK? I also really wanted to see for myself whether there really is such a big issue with soya. And finally, to see what we think the future holds for ingredients. With this slide, I just give you a quick overview of where in the world my travels took me. Here's some snaps from just 4 of the countries I visited. So, firstly, Canada. This is outside the Prairie Swine Centre. It snowed just before I arrived, on top of the covering of snow that was already there. So it's quite an extreme environment to be producing pigs in. And I stayed on in Canada after the CSE. It's a decent pig industry and has a very good reputation for research. So one of my main visits there were to the research side of things. I then went to China, where the pig industry is growing rapidly as the demand for animal protein increases. They have the world's largest population of sows, somewhere between 46 and 52 million sows. They're not quite sure, but somewhere in that region. These are pig finishing buildings going up on a brand new site that was going to house 4,500 sows, part of a bigger business that was aiming for 10,000 sows from a standing start within 12 months. So that just shows the rate of growth there. I also visited the agricultural powerhouse that's Brazil. This is a picture of Iguazu Falls, looking from the Argentinian side back across to Brazil. And I just use this picture to illustrate that Brazil just does everything on a huge scale. So they're big in pigs. They're the largest producer of Sawyer globally now. So yeah, it was just to highlight that one. The bottom picture is me surrounded by chilies in Australia. These are the chilies belonging to a fellow Nuffield scholar, Trent, who many of you will know. And this visit really highlighted for me that you can learn so much even when you're not necessarily on topic. Also, I fitted in a short trip to Turkey. This was for the US Export Council annual Sawyer meeting, and finally finished off in July with a visit to the Netherlands. So what did I find on my travels? Firstly, that Sawyer really is the dominant protein worldwide, and this is generally coupled with maize and or wheat and barley. From what I've seen, I really do believe that Sawyer will remain the dominant protein for the foreseeable future. I did find alternatives existed, so some examples. In Canada, I found that they were using large quantities of canola, or rapeseed meal as we know it, and in addition, the Canadians were making use of peas and beans when there's a surplus from the human food chain. The Australians are using quite large quantities of lupins, particularly in their finishing pig diets, up to sort of 35% inclusions. And then the Dutch are very, very good at using liquid co-products. One thing I would say, however, is that all of these alternatives were being used alongside Sawyer. I just say at this point, the real benefit of Sawyer is the sheer volume available, its price, and its consistency of its nutrient profile. These all make it very, very attractive. We're already using rapeseed meal, peas, beans, and sunflower here in the UK, and these have increased in recent years. With ingredients such as peas and beans, we're in a bit of a catch-22 situation. We would happily use more in pig feeds, but the volumes are not there because of the value of them, and I'm not an agronomist, but I understand that they're quite difficult to grow. At the moment, with Sawyer trading at £330 a tonne, wheat, I put in here a figure of 125, but there's maybe some debate around that. Peas are only worth about £170 a tonne. So the key question is, can you grow them for that? If you can, then we would use them. Obviously, there's been some recent changes in the Common Agricultural Policy, and this may well have an impact on this. So we may start to see some more peas and beans being grown, and we're in a good position in terms of our research and understanding, so we will be able to utilise them. I attended 2 Sawyer conferences during my travels. So firstly, the US Sawyer Export Council meeting in Turkey, and then I went to the Roundtable for Responsible Sawyer Production, their annual meeting, which was being held in Brazil. It's coming to Europe for this next year. I also had the opportunity to visit some Sawyer growers whilst I was in Brazil and also in China. It appeared to me that efforts are being made to improve their environmental credentials. However, I would say that there's still some way to go, and the situation certainly isn't perfect. Also, I found that alternatives, with the alternative proteins that do exist, these do face the same challenges that Sawyer faces. So we still need the land availability, and they still need the same inputs such as water and fertilizers. So any alternatives really do have to be considered very carefully. At the US Sawyer meeting, one of the speakers, an analyst called John Bays, talked about there being a 30% wastage of Sawyer on a global basis. This did include countries such as India, which don't have such a developed market. And he also said that actually globally there isn't a shortage of protein. So this 30% wasted really, really shocked me. And it wasn't really until I went to Brazil that I really believed that that could be true. I followed wagons whilst I was on the road hauling Sawyer, and you get a constant ping, ping, ping on your windscreen as the Sawyer is being lost out of the back of wagons. So when you think about the fact that Sawyer regularly travels over 2,000 kilometres to port by road, you realise that this figure could be true. At the RTRS meeting in Brazil, one of the presenters, a guy from Rabobank, talked about wastage as well. He was quoting figures of 10.2 million tonnes per annum in the Mato Grosso region. This is sufficient to feed 1/3 of China's annual pig population, so really phenomenal quantities. All this is really interesting stuff and actually quite frustrating in a way from a UK pig producer's perspective, so I needed to try and find something that would actually be of benefit. There was 2 real moments that consolidated all my thoughts from my travels. Firstly, back in the UK, I went to a BPEX Innovation Conference, and the meeting chairman, a chap called Andrew Knowles, who actually works for BPEX, used a quotation from a chap called Dave Brailsford. He was the performance director of British cycling during the Olympics, and he talks about a concept called the aggregation of marginal gains. He explains this as shown on the quote on the screen there. It means taking 1% from everything you do, finding 1% margin for improvement in everything you do. And that's what they do from the mechanics upwards. And naturally, all of these tiny gains can add up to a large gain, so potentially race winning or record winning. I really see this as something that we could very easily be applied on farm, whatever you are producing. We all need to think about reducing our wastage and improve our efficiency in whatever field we're working in. I do understand that BPEX are going to use this concept in a future campaign, which is a great idea. This idea was consolidated further when I finally met with Toppigs in the Netherlands. They're a breeding company, and they have a number of good concepts in their breeding program. They look from the opposite direction and talk about minimising wastage. In the pig world, we get hung up on pigs weaned per sow per year, but we're actually producing meat. So we need to look at trying to reduce the losses along the chain. Got an example here, just looking at Sawyer usage and whether if producers could move from being in the average performance category up to the top 10%, they could considerably save their volume of feed used and their Sawyer usage. Just on this simple example, this equates to about 13,000 tonnes of Sawyer saved per year. It's not huge volumes in the schemes of things, but think back to that concept of marginal gains. My final slide is taken from the beginning of a presentation that I've given a few times in the last month or so to UK producers, and I'll present it at some regional pig discussion group meetings in the coming months. The whole presentation focuses on the ways in which producers can improve efficiency, from things such as correct management of the pig's environment to ensuring that the diets used on farm are optimal. Although I can't directly influence the wastage and efficiency on farm working in the allied industry, I can certainly help to ensure that the diets are optimal, and I can help producers recognise that the key areas where they can really make a difference to their business. So that brings me to the end. Thank you very much for listening. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank my family and friends and colleagues for their help and support through my scholarship. It's been a fabulous experience, which has reignited my desire to learn and extend my contacts in the pig research and production world. And this will really help me, I think, to make a difference in this challenging and interesting industry that I'm very grateful to be a part of. Thank you.